Today we're going to be turning all of this into this. You can find the parts list in this video's description, and where important, I'll go over some of the parts as we assemble this project. If you find this video useful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your fellow hunters. You need a rubber mallet similar to this one. You're going to have to drill 2 holes in it. This one is 5/16 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch from the top. This one is 1/4 inch, 5 1/4 inch from the top. You're also going to need probably some wood blocks. Basically, you need this to be about 1 inch more or less in height. I took some pieces of wood and just cut them up. You can see they were not measured in a specific way. This board is 14 inches by 16 inches by 3/4 of an inch thick. It doesn't have to be as wide as this. It could be a little narrower, but you'll get the point of why you need it to be a certain width. I've pre-drilled this hole with 2 holes here and here. You could probably see them easier from back here. The one up here, I've pre-drilled some small holes here just so it doesn't crack when I'm drilling it onto the board. These are 5/16 of an inch. They don't go all the way through, they go up to here, and then I've made some, I guess, countersinks on here. You'll see as I assemble this. This part, you don't have to do it the exact same way that I'm doing it. This is just how I chose to assemble it. I thought that was the best way for the design. But you can assemble it whichever way fits your needs. I'm using these 1.5 inch screws that I had laying around with some lock nuts. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to assemble this part onto that board. These are 3D printed. These are 3D printed. This is 3D printed. And this little wheel here is 3D printed. You'll find the link for those parts in the description as well, so you can 3D print them yourself. So first, I'm going to put this onto this. Now, like I said, I happen to have these laying around. These are actually from an old steel futon. So I'm just going to pull this apart just to get the part assembled. You actually do need to put this piece on first if you're going to assemble it the way that I am with the screws like this from the back. You have to put this on first. Otherwise, if you screw it in from the top, then you could assemble it in any order you like. So that's how that goes. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to tighten these up and see if it's nice there. I'm going to screw these onto the board and then I'll be back. I've gone ahead and tightened this on. These are lock nuts. You should put the top piece on first, a little bit off to the side. So actually I'm going to put that one on first, and then I'm going to put on the mallet, put on the wheel, and I'll explain why there's 3, and then line this up on the bottom and then tie it on. Just as a note, you're going to need 2 screws with the smooth type and the nut. This one is 5/16 by 2.5 inches long. This one is 1/4 inch by 2 inches long. Now the reason for the length is more for the smooth section than for the thread. So that's why I chose these. On this one I have 4 washers. On this one I have 1 washer, a lock nut or a pressure nut, depending how people call it. Here I have 2 nuts. If you don't have a lock nut for this, you can use 2 nuts. Here I do have a lock nut, but I'm going to be using the 2 nuts to lock them onto each other. This one is for the top, the 5/16 inch, and the 1/4 inch is for the wheels. Now before I assemble this, let me speak about the wheels. I printed 3, and you'll find these on the design. This one's 1.5 inches in diameter. This one's 2 inches in diameter, and this one's 2.5 inches in diameter. The reason for the different sizes is, depending on the size of the wood that you have, it should be at least 1 inch. It could be more, slightly less, and that's why you have the different wheels, because once this is on here, depending on the distance between the motor arm at the lowest point or the highest point and the wheel, you'll need to use a different size wheel. In this setup, I'm going to be using the 2-inch wheel, but depending on your distance, you might need 1 of these. So that's why I printed 3, just so you can see them, and I designed the 3 just in case you have a slightly different dimension to give you some options. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to assemble the mallet on the top and then line this up with the face of the mallet. I won't show you assembling the mallet because I'm pretty sure you know how to put in some screws. This washer is going to go on the end, and these will go on each side of the mallet, and this one on the outside. This is just to try to help center the mallet a little bit on here. That's why I'm having these 2 washers in the middle. So I'm going to assemble this, line this up, screw it on, and then I'll be back. Alright, so I'm going to head and assemble the mallet at the top. You can see it does have some play, and that's needed. You just want this to be loose enough to do this. So I'm just going to line this up more or less in the center and screw on my wood. Alright, so as you can see, the wood is screwed on, so more or less centered. So it does have some play. If you do have too much play on top, you can probably add an extra washer to get it to be more solid. Just make sure whatever you do, this has to move nicely and freely. The next step is to put on the wheel. I'm going to use the 1/4 inch and the 2-inch wheel. This goes on the outside. This wheel goes on the inside. You can see there's a little bump here to help distance it from the mallet. This is just, I don't want it rubbing against the label on the mallet. This goes on here. And now goes the lock nut. So I'm going to go ahead, tighten that up, and I'll be back. Now I've gone ahead and tightened this lock nut. Make sure you don't over-tighten this. You want this loose enough that the wheel can spin well enough. Step number 2 is our wiper motor bracket. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to change the angle of the camera so I can show you this better. Of all the parts of assembling this, this is actually the most complicated, if you will, because you have to tie this on first before you can put in the wiper motor, because the wiper motor is going to go like this and it's going to block your screws. But to line it up, you need to have the wiper motor and the arm on it to align it. So I'm going to make, shift, put it on here. So what you want to do, you want the arm to be at its angle this way. So you can mark it at the center of your wheel, because you actually want this to push up on the center. You don't want to push up at the end over here, because it's just going to get stuck. You want it to be there to push it up. So right here is mock assembled. It's at the center. I have my space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now mark where I need this to be. Now that that's marked, I can take off my motor. Line it up again and screw it on. Now for this, I'm going to be using these guys. If I had a button head that was flat, that would be much better because it will be putting downward pressure. If you don't have flat ones, you can put a washer on these to create a flat surface for them to put pressure on instead of putting pressure on the sides of your 3D print. That's most likely what I will do. I'm just going to find some small washers that fit on here, put them on, and then I'm going to tie this on and continue assembling. Now just as a note, just because I was about to do it here and I sort of did it, when you're lining this up with your motor here, make sure that, let me just show you here, when you have your arm on here, make sure that you put this under. You want to make sure that your arm is under here, under the wheel. Because as you can see from this line here, when I was showing you, I marked it too far out and I actually had put this screw in to realize that I had actually messed up. The bottom one's fine to line this up because that's just more the positioning, but the front to side, you know, was actually off. So I'm just gonna go ahead and mark this again. Now, one way that you can actually do this is, if you do mark it from the outside, you just measure the distance that you want from the wheel and just offset by that distance here. But either way, just make sure you have it in before you screw it on. Alright, so as you can see, I've gone ahead and screwed this on. I ran out of washers, so I'll use a smaller one here, but it's fine. So the next step is going to be to assemble the motor onto here and then assemble the arm. Just as a note, to make it easy to assemble the motor, just push your mallet back to the other side and then you have plenty of room to assemble your motor and your arm. Okay, so as you can see, I've gone ahead and assembled the motor onto the bracket. I just wanted to make a note that based on the size of the hole, I had to use another washer that was wider than the hole with the screws for the motor to tie it on. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and assembled the arm. Just as a precaution, make sure that these screws, the end of them, are not too high, because otherwise it can hit the end of the arm here. This piece here, it'll be easy to assemble this onto here without this being on here. You might have to bang it in a little bit and use some pressure because this does fit in pretty tight, and that is by design. That's why I didn't show you putting it on, because I did spend some time putting this on here and it was pretty tight, and you want it to be pretty tight on there. So basically, this is the whole assembly. The next step, I'm just going to show you this running once more and we're done. Again, don't forget to like this video if you find it useful, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Take care. So just wanted to follow up on one part, the size of the board. So as you can see, this board is about 14 inches. So what you really need, more or less, it's something about 9 inches, right? It could even be less, it could even be 8. You just need it to be able to fit the project on there. The length, really about 14 inches will probably be enough. This one is 16 inches. So technically 8 by 14 inches would probably be the smallest one you could have. Again, that's 8 inches wide by 14 inches tall is the smallest. I did forget to mention one thing. So as far as impact, meaning impact of the hammer to the board. Obviously, when this is on the door, it's not going to be in this position, so gravity will tend to keep it down. So you're not going to get as much of an impact. So what you will need to do is get some rubber bands, put a screw or nail here and here. You put it across, and that'll create some tension going down. And that'll give you a bigger bang. So you can put as many rubber bands as you want as long as your wiper motor can lift up the hammer. And that will give you faster and louder bangs. So I feel visuals are always the best option. So as you can see there, we have our screws and our rubber band. If necessary, I'll put more rubber bands, as you can see them there. And this, it gives you a bigger, but you'll hear it with it and without it. So as you can see right there, it has been fully assembled. You can see the piece on here. So I'm gonna turn it on. Right now it's connected at low speed. So I'm just gonna hit my switch here. So as you can see, it's moving there at low speed. Now I don't have the hammer on there yet because I have it supported up here just so you can see this turning. So I'm gonna put the hammer on. And what we're gonna see right now is the board working without the rubber band on there. So let's turn this on. So that's without the rubber band. So as you can see, it's not super loud. So now I'm going to put on the rubber band across the screws that I installed earlier. So as you can see, that's one rubber band on. So now I'm going to turn it on with the rubber band at low speed. You can see it's a lot louder. Now I'm going to switch the wire. So now this is at high speed with the rubber band. You can see that's pretty loud. So as you can see, it's working pretty well. If we wanted a stronger bang, we could add more rubber bands. So we have seen this working at low speed, high speed with the rubber band, at low speed without the rubber band. I don't think there's a point in showing it at high speed without the rubber band. This is with one rubber band, and you can see how loud it was. If I had put more than one, it should in theory strike down faster, but it's only gonna go in a sense as fast as this motor can go. So yeah, it's not as fast as a pneumatic, but for what we're doing here, it works very well, I believe.